Good morning, guys. Abhi is in sunny Boston and David is in bomb cyclone land in California. David, are you drenched? Are you wet? How are you doing?
Oh yeah, the bomb cyclone, man. I'm just waiting for my power to go out. So
I had power go out Tuesday to Thursday. Abhi, you guys okay? I don't think you have any bomb cyclone thing.
Yeah, no, thankfully. So we're pretty sunny right now, and it's exciting to be in this weather, you know. I hate
Welcome to the podcast. This is your first debut at the world's greatest podcast for GTM, right, David?
oh yeah, 100%.
absolutely.
Okay, so today's topic we got from a couple of different people on LinkedIn. And if you guys are not following us in LinkedIn, please do. It's linkedin.com/in/slash iCustomer AI. Okay, marketers are trying to make their planning completed for 2025. Some of them have already completed it. Some of them are in the process of putting together their planning for 2025. And there are lots of different strategies, but the key part, which seems to be continuing in 2025, is do more with less. Marketing budgets are not dramatically increasing. People are still optimizing their marketing spend, whether it is spending the same amount on advertising, trying to get more out of that advertising budget, or if it is ABM campaigns, things of that nature. So they're trying to do more with less, that we know consistently. So, what are some of the key decisions we're going to discuss in this webinar? What are some of the key decisions they have to make? And what are some of the things that they could use a lot of good data and decision intelligence to do that? David, let me kick off with you. What are some of the decisions you think? What are the three? You're speaking to a lot of customers, you're speaking to a lot of prospects. What are you seeing across the board?
Um, Actually, what we're seeing a lot of is consolidation. So like people are using too many data vendors, they're using too many things in their stack. They're having to traverse multiple pieces of glass to accomplish, relatively simple goals. So we're seeing a lot of that consolidation. Um, so yeah, that's what I would add to the conversation.
So then the decisions are more which ones do we cut, which ones do we keep, right? Abhi, what are you seeing in the same realm? What are some of the key decisions you think people are looking to make in 2025, marketers and GTM teams?
I think the decisions are mostly the same, in some way, which is like, how do I hit my number? How do we get to where we want to be next year? So it all starts from there. But this is a different time now. Things used to be very predictable, used to be very kind of, here's my, leading, lagging indicator to get hit the end of the year this much. We're living in a most unpredictable time, not in the way how we see everything around us, but also about like, the evolving customer behavior, and which is the rate of evolving for customer behavior is so rapid. So in those circumstances where you rely on annual planning, QBRs, and things like that, where your data is kind of live, the behavior is live, the customer is live, people are coming to your website daily. There's a new pattern emerging. Things has to be on your fingertip, and to do that, only then you can take a decision like, is this campaign working well? Is this channel working out well for me if I'm a marketer? Is this strategy going direct or going after this segment is really working out well? Instead of like looking through everything what we call like the measurement maze, which is like seeing the rear view after the end of year, after the end of quarter, like, okay, this hasn't worked. And this is like a separate topic altogether, like, how to even get to that measurement maze, given that all the data is in like 500 different systems. So I think personally, decision intelligence is what we call is one of the most greatest problem today, where you have to have the right information to take decision which would help you hit your goal and help you hit your win. So It's kind of a curveball answer to what you were asking, Mukund, but that's how I think right now.
So let's talk about that, right? One portion of it, which is David also mentioned, they have to make, let's say we take three decisions that are important for 2025. Number one, what metrics should I now look at? How frequently should I look at them to give an understanding as to whether we are in the right direction or not? Number two, what channels should we be doubling down on? What channels should we be exploring? What channels should we be cutting back on? And the third one is the stack, or what is the technology available for us to automate as much as possible the things that we are trying to do, so it frees up our time to focus on things that we need to get done, as opposed to integrating two systems via Zapier or doing all of that legwork, if you will, right? So let's start with the last one first. Uh, you know, as you look at marketing technology stack, Martech stack, GTM stack, RevOps stack, a lot of tools are starting to do the same thing that other tools also do. There's a ton of overlap. There's not 100% overlap. There's about 80, 70, 60%, depending on who you talk to. Look at 10 different companies. If you have five of them or four of them, each of them are being used for specific things, but there's a lot of overlap between capabilities that one company can do and another company can do. How are marketers to make a decision on stack? Let's talk about stack first. How do you make these decisions? How are the smart people looking at these things and saying, hey, of these four companies or these four technology solutions we have, what is the way to be able to get rid of one or two of them, save some budget that can go into other programs?
See, I personally think this is where people are going wrong. Like starting the problem or starting thinking about the solution from the tech stack is actually the root cause of a lot of problems. Instead, if we just switch the gear and try and set like, what is that goal we all trying to achieve? And especially in go to market, they're like sales team have their own goal and marketing has their own and customer success has their own. They all have these vanity metrics, whatsoever. But as one team or as one organization, what is it should be actually top down. So what is my goal? In order to get to that goal, what is the strategy towards it, to achieving that goal? And then after this, the strategy is established, how are we going to operate? Like, what is the asset we've got? Or what is the tech or tool or process we have in place to hit that or execute on or operationalize this strategy? So that's how I think. I don't know what do you think, David?
Yeah. It's like rally around the funnel, right? Which is really what's driving the business needs, right? So, like a recent example we ran into, everyone needs to drive awareness. And so you're driving it with ads, you're using UTMs, you're trying to figure out like how do you drive awareness down to like identified, like, from someone viewing an impression where it's anonymous to them maybe filling out some form. So now you've got two streams of data. You've got clickstream data, IP address data, maybe UTMs, and then they all aggregate into some folder of sorts, like maybe in GA4, where, it's under direct, which is like the most nebulous folder ever or category. Um, and then, maybe it's coming from Facebook or whatnot. And then, so like at the top of the funnel level, you're trying to figure out how to optimize like your ad spend. But if all those UTMs are aggregating sort of into wrong buckets, then already you've identified a bottleneck. So people should sort of look at it from that angle. Funnel, demand capture, improvement. And how do I get there?
And we all have lived through that times where business or executive has always been like, we don't have the data for this, or in order to execute on this strategy, we don't know what has worked, what has not worked, and things like that. Well, here's the good news. We have so much data that if we can't handle it. Like, there's no dearth of data in today's world. Just your website emanates so much data. What David's point was, leave aside all the kind of leading, lagging indicator kind of tracking. And people are full of, like, every average business is using like 10 plus tool. Even a company, a startup, 1 year old company is kind of now relying on more than like 20 tools, 20 SaaS tools. So there's no dearth of data, is what I feel. But what is really missing is, what do you do with this data? And then it comes to the point of the goal, because either you can do a whole bottom up approach. So, like, here's my data, can I create this data product? Can I create this insight? Now that, which is a problem of, like, you have a hammer in the hand and you're just looking for a nail to hit on, which we say. Or you come top down, and there are tons of frameworks out there. Finally, there are businesses where, if they're trying to hit, certain revenue or certain strategy or certain goal, and create that, what David said, a kind of a unified funnel, and then start thinking backwards, from there. So in order to hit our 100 million ARR by the end of this year, or next year, what do we do? What's the next milestone? In order to get there, that's, the next step on the funnel, then next, and then next. And then you actually start seeing where are the friction point in these GTM funnel. Like, where exactly is we're having friction? Is it the conversion from the time of the top of funnel to middle, or is the actual middle to closing is where we kind of hitting? So I think this is more of that operating nuances, which is possible. And this is where you tend to take decision. And this is where you need decision intelligence, where you're like, okay, here's a friction point. Here's what I got to plug in. I don't know. This is how I think about it. Being a data nerd myself in my previous history.
You're on mute, Mukund.
Tell me a little bit about some of the decisions that need to be made about channel. Obviously, this thing keeps ebbing and flowing. Sometimes LinkedIn seems to work for some people. After some time, email seems to work. Now, Facebook, which was working very well for a lot of people in B2C, especially e-commerce companies that we are talking to, they seem to think Instagram and Facebook are working very well. But channel, how do you look at channel overall and say, what are the decisions that we need to make about channel? We have a lot of data that we get from Facebook. We get a lot of data from Google Ads. We get a ton of data about this, but how do you make it easy enough to be able to simplify decision making and say, okay, here we're going to spend, this is the media mix that we're going to have. This is the amount of money that we're going to be able to spend on these to go back to hitting our goals, if you will, in terms of customer acquisition. How does that decision system, decision intelligence around media mix and advertising and channels work?
Yeah, so when I think about it, having seen a bunch of GA4 instances now, those categories that the UTMs fall into, I think, is a big challenge. Because the logic you can put into them is fairly simple. It's sort of include or exclude, and it's just looking for some keyword within the UTM.
Yeah.
And if you get the logic wrong for what occupies what bucket, then already you're moving away from decision intelligence to creating a data mess. And so if you don't know, like, the what channels are being most engaged, then how are you supposed to know what to pump more resources into? So that I'm seeing that as a key issue.
Abhi?
Yeah, I think more, again, taking a step back, like, I think a lot of people want to be data driven,
Yeah.
and it's easy said than done, because data driven, when they say they want to be data driven, they want to be more data driven, decision driven, or sort of a thing, data to decision driven. And this is a huge kind of a gap, between having a data and looking at a small point. But the moment you're dealing with more than one point solution, they have multiple situation of data where you have to, like, merge them or interpret them in the way what's going on here and what's going on here. That's like a hard problem. And that's where like, decisioning gets harder because you could just look at one point solution, get one picture, and then you suddenly look at the other solution, they look at a completely different picture. And this is what is happening. This happens at a team level, this happened at a channel level, this happened at a tool level. So the whole point is like, how do I merge all this and then look at it holistically in the rule setting, which I understand? So that context is important, right? In which I'm seeing the data,
Yeah.
so I can see what is really going on. Like, how do I interpret it? Is everything, how is it relevant to my business? How is it relevant to my goal? And this is where a lot of people say data literacy and this and that. But, you can't rely on this data guy who's going to educate you. If you're an operating executive and you need to be on top of your numbers, you need to be on top of your data, you can use tools, you can use help, you can seek help, but mentally you should be like wired about like, what's the metrics and how do I interpret what's really not working out, why this leading indicator is not working out in my favor or otherwise, like where that friction is. Again, I'm kind of pounding on that part. I think this is less about finding the solution through a tool. It's more of a mindset shift. So I'm sorry, I'm not answering exactly what you're saying there, but purposely I'm trying to, change the narrative in the way how it is really required by folks.
When we are talking to GTM teams, I'll give you an example. A couple of customers that we were talking to last week as well, or this week, if you will. Right? We're talking to the customers, and the decisions that say they seem to be wanting to make the decisions almost always fall into the hey, it could go either way kind of a bucket. Meaning, for example, one of the customers that we were talking to, small sized, 50 million or so revenue SaaS company in the Bay Area. Their question was, listen, we are trying to do ABM campaigns, but we don't want to invest so much money that we put already into the ABM solution, which seems like a one size fits all. So they're trying to break up portions of it and just use a more aligned mechanism and methodology. If they're trying to make a decision for their ABM campaign, what are some of the things that they need to think about? How's the data framework work to be able to help them make those decisions? A key part of the decision intelligence we always talk about it is you need to have the data infrastructure in place and the data foundation to be successful. What are some of the elements of the data foundation they need to have in place to be successful to make decisions that help them do the right things, if you will?
Well, it's like if you're talking about any sort of motion where, and what is ABM really? It's a methodology for targeting the right people and then measuring sort of how the progress is going with that, with targeting those folks. And so it's like the who and what and the when, going back to basics. So who you're targeting should not be arbitrary, right? It should be data driven. And what I've seen in the market a lot is who we're targeting is driven primarily by upper management, and uh, it's almost always, well, yeah, these guys have the most money, right? And
Yeah, yeah.
so let's target them.
Loudest voice in the room.
Yeah. And then that trickles down, right? And I would say, okay, great. Yeah, they have more money. Maybe they can pay you more. And, but is that data driven? Does that reflect your current user base? And that's where companies really need to take a hard look at themselves and maybe be a little more agile. I mean, look at Instagram, right? Or even like high touch. Or Instagram started out as sort of a Foursquare where
Yeah.
you would check into a restaurant, right? And then they realized, oh, our users are really using the platform more to post pictures. And they did a massive pivot, right? And that was a data driven decision. So that, that's proper decision intelligence. So
Yeah. Yeah, no, I cannot agree more. Like ABM, and we have been kind of associated for so many years and helped a lot of customers succeed in it, both strategy and execution wise. But end of the day, this is really like yet another strategy to create demand.
Hmm.
And it's more data-driven demand, frankly, where marketing was all about like, throwing the net to do fishing. This is more like, fishing by spear kind of approach. And in which every step is a data-driven step, which requires decisioning, which accounts to target, when to target, how to prioritize these accounts, because you can't just target. And we're in 2024, like this has been going around forever. Like you just can't create one list just before the year start and they call it out as your ABM list. And then I'm like, okay, we got to go now. See you guys next year, and sales goes their way, marketing goes their way. This is a team, or this is an organization wide strategy. And that's why some people call it like, no, not ABM. We're going to call ABX, or whatever the next buzzword around that. But frankly,
But what you're saying is, your ICP is a moving target.
it is. And that was my first point itself. Like we're living in a world of totally unprecedented instances. There's a lot of volatility in all forms. You can't have stale data. And that's why we're emphasizing on more decision intelligence than actually data intelligence. You see, because you only interpret. It's actually, if you need to be more outcome oriented, you're going to focus on decisions, which will lead up to those outcomes. And that's why the focus on decision intelligence is important. To understand that narrative is important.
Yeah.
So just to put a wrap on your ABM point, I think it's not just about finding which accounts to target, when to target, how to target, what's the preference, who's the buyer, what content would resonate to them, through what channel, at what time or a channel, when to stop, when not to bother them too much, is that holy grail of what we call decision intelligence could be applied in ABM.
Awesome. I think it was a good way to at least kick things off in terms of some of the four decisions that people are trying to make. If you had to think about two of the three of the customers that you're talking to and give us a wrap up in terms of, okay, we're trying to make these decisions, we're trying to get the data in place, but what seems to be stopping them? What's the one thing or two things that are stopping them from getting to that level of decision intelligence with the data that they may have or may not have? David, do you want to go first?
Yeah. So, I mean, you want to get to decision intelligence and but you need the data first. And the data needs to be, in good shape. So it's like if you're making a meal, you want to have the best ingredients. So data is the ingredient. So you want to make sure the ingredients are in good shape. That requires a lot of work. Um, and then automating pipelines such that your good data is then aggregating in a way where you can automate the decision intelligence. I think those are the two big problems that the market hasn't really solved for, right? Like there's a lot of data vendors, a lot of enrichment vendors, that works. But getting from your ingredients to a meal, which would be the decision intelligence, that's a big gap.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, besides working a lot of enterprise client, we have this laser focus a lot on the mid-market space where we're trying to work with the senior leadership, GTM leaders, even private equity firms, a lot of them. And they're all trying to plan out for 2025. Everyone is kind of restacking. Everyone's looking where's the bloat is for MarTech. And what is the goal they're trying to achieve in a more optimized way. And it all starts off with like the goal they're trying to achieve, which is like literally going into the system. And we do this GTM assessment where we actually within 24 to 48 hours look at all your system, your critical sources system, and assess where had been the friction point in your overall funnel. And
Yeah.
then sort of come back and suggest, well, it's not like this one size fit all tool would solve that problem, but you have this conversion issue right here. And or you may have this ICP issue right there. You think your strategy is to focus on these kind of businesses, but your data says elsewhere. Your data is completely not relevant to the ISP you've been targeting about. So no matter what you do in the boardroom, when you go into the trenches and see, where's that data in, you really start to seeing those kind of friction point, and naturally gets decisioning like, okay, I got to fix this part first before going to that. Instead of buying this expensive technology, let's focus on my funnel, let's focus on the friction point, and then get to the decision intelligence of it. So that's the loop we're trying to make people work when they come up with this abstracted, here's my problem sort of thing.
Awesome. Listen, I think that's actually a good takeaway from today as well. If you have questions about decision intelligence, if you have questions about the data stack, if you're trying to make decisions in 2025, drop us a note about an assessment that we can do for you. We've done it for a lot of customers, so we can tell you a little bit about what are some of the things that are working, that are not working, what are some of the data infrastructure elements and foundation elements you need to put in place. But Abhi, stay dry. David, you need to stay even drier. I think the rain and maybe hopefully you don't have the outage that we had. We had a power outage for a day and a half, nearly 2 days. But hopefully things go fairly well. And happy Thanksgiving. We won't have a podcast next week because of Thanksgiving, but we will see you guys the week after. Thanks, guys.
All right, mahalo.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Bye.